In this video, let us begin working on our project 2. We are going to make a top-down shooter game where we can use the WSAD keys to move, we can use the mouse to look around. I'll also be showing you how we can use a controller instead of a mouse. We are not going to be building the logic that lets us seamlessly switch between controller and mouse, but if you choose to use a controller or you choose to use a mouse for this project, both should work just fine. In this video, let us start by setting up our player character, setting up their movement, and doing mouse look. In the next part, I will show you how we can turn that mouse look into controller looking, but let's start with the keyboard and mouse since that's what we all have access to. To begin, I think the best place to start is by adding our inputs. Oh, by the way, I made a new project, and this time I just didn't add the starter content because that's just a little extra bloat, which we don't really need for this project. You can just find the assets you guys need on the store and add them in there. So to start, let's do let's create the inputs we need first. That would be a good place to start. So I'm going to make a folder called inputs, and in here I'll just make another folder called input actions. And in here, let us create our input actions. So input action, I'll call one walk. I'm going to just copy paste it 2 times. For now, we'll just have a shoot. And we'll have an aim. So we can leave shoot as it is. We just have to change aim to a 2D axis, and we got to change walk into a 2D axis. Perfect. Okay, I'll go up a folder and let's just set these inputs in here. So input mapping context. Input mapping context is prefixed with an IMC, so I'll do that. And I'm going to call this TwinStick controls. Open it up and let us add the mappings that we need. So shoot, aim, and walk. Perfect. Okay, let's set up these controls real quick. So for shooting, I think I'll just use the left mouse button for now, and I will also just add controller support this time, and I think the trigger would be good. So I'm going to do gamepad right trigger digital because I don't need the analog axis of the trigger. I just need to know if it was pressed or not. And under aiming, we don't need to put in our mouse controls here because we will be doing that a slightly different way, which we'll look at later. So let's just add the gamepad controls. We will use the gamepad right thumbstick 2D axis. This just represents the X and the Y axis on the gamepad. And finally for walk, just like we did with our first person project in the last video, first thing, easiest thing to do, let's add the gamepad, and then let's add oops, that's the wrong one. Let's add 4, yeah. Alright, let's add 4 inputs into this, and we'll do W, S, A, and D. So we can leave D alone because by default D is going to be positive on the X. A is going to be negative on the X, so we will add a negate modifier to it. W is going to be forward on the Y, so we need to swizzle this axis. So we will swizzle input axis. And finally, S is going to be the negative of W, so first we need to swizzle it, and then we need to negate it. Swizzle, negate. Okay. So there we have our walk, and we have all our controls set up, really. The only other thing I'm going to do just to make this project a little nicer is I'm going to add to our controller thumbsticks, I am going to add a dead zone modifier to both these, just so our controls feel a little nicer, not too snappy, especially if someone doesn't have, you know, a perfect controller or a controller with perfect sticks, which most controllers tend to have slightly wobbly sticks. It's always good to have a dead zone. You can always open the dead zone and play with the values. I'm just going to leave them as default. So now that we have our controls set up, I am going to set up our player. Let us go back up to our content folder. I'm going to make a new folder called third person player. And the reason I'm making a folder is later on when we add our meshes and our animations, they can all go in the same folder. Just keep it nice and organized. In here, let's start by making our character blueprint. BP TwinStick pawn. I do realize I call this folder third person player. Instead, I'm going to call it TwinStick player. So it makes more sense. And let's also set up a game mode while we're at it. Oops, that's a new folder. So in my root folder, I'm just going to make a new game mode, call it GM TwinStick. I'll open up this GM TwinStick, and we will set the player pawn to our BP TwinStick. And then I will make sure in my project settings, maps and modes, default game mode, change it to GM TwinStick. Lastly, I don't want this big map, so I'm going to make a smaller map. I'm just going to make a new basic level and save this level out again and call it test. This is going to be my main level for testing everything. And that should be all the basic setup we need. Let's start building our player up. So I'm just going to open up my character, and for now we don't have a mesh. We will do a separate video on how we can get a mesh from Mixamo in here, but for now I do want some visual representation because this is not a first person game. I'm just going to add a cube and call it body. Scale it down. I will add maybe, oops, not a plane. I will add another cube in here. Child it to this cube and just scale it so it vaguely looks like arms pointing forward. And the reason I'm doing this is just so when we get our character rotate, we can see that rotation. We can see him or see them pointing forwards. Just vaguely get it to look right. And just to make it look a little more complete, let us add a sphere to it. And scale that sphere. Oh, it looks a little weird, but gets the point across that my character now has a tiny little head. Okay. So this looks like a little person. The main thing here is that we've added these two arms that point in the direction of this arrow. So for now, when we're testing our movement and just our player in general, we can actually see it turning. Next, we need to add a camera. So let's go into add. We're not going to just directly add our camera. We're going to add something called a spring arm first. And to that, we are going to add a camera. And we can see when we click on the spring arm, there's this little red line and a camera there. So what the spring arm does is it keeps the camera at the end of it. By changing this target arm length, we can move our camera back and forth. So I'll set it to something like 600 for now. And with the spring arm, the nice thing is we can just rotate it to have it look kind of top down. Now we can see if our character looks fine by just going back to our level and hitting play. There you go. I think this looks fine for now. Obviously, we can't control anything, can't look, but this looks good for now. Okay, so we have a working character, we have a character that shows up on screen. Let us get the character working. Let's start with movement because that's the easiest. Before we do anything, we need to first give our character controller the new mapping context, the input mapping context. So let's do that. We start off with get controller, and then let's cast to the player controller. And this time I'm going to promote my player controller to a variable. I'm going to save it. And I'm just going to call it player controller. And like we did before, let's get enhanced input local player subsystem. It's quite a mouthful. And add a new mapping context to it. And we are going to add IMC TwinStick shooter, or TwinStick controls. Awesome. And now let us start with the walking. So we had IA walk, I believe. There you go. And this one should be fairly simple. When we think about our twin stick shooter, because it's going to be top down, our camera is not actually affected by the rotation. So if this was the level and this is my player and they were looking in this direction, it doesn't matter what direction they're looking in. When we hit up, we're going to move up. When we hit down, we're going to move down. Left will move us left, and right will move us right. So the rotation of our character doesn't really matter, and that actually makes this whole process much easier to do, because we don't actually have to calculate anything. We can just add the movement input. We're still going to add two movement inputs, one for forward and one for left and right. And all we really need to do is type get right vector, and we can create it from a rotation of 0, 0, 0. So this is creating a right vector that is the world right. Really, we could also just come in here and do 1 and make this 1, but I find this way a little more convenient. Just so that I can read, it says get right vector, and I know that this is going to move us left and right. And if I did another one for get forward vector, and plug it in here. But I do want to stress that this get forward vector, what comes out here is just the same as 1, 0, 0. This is just, for me, a little easier to read and understand what I'm looking at. Next, let's take our action value and let's break the vector. So we have an X and a Y. X moves us left and right, and Y moves us up and down. And there you go. That was fairly simple to set up the walking. Let's go check if it works. Go back to our level, hit play. There you go. A, D, W, S, and the combination of them work as well. So that was movement. Movement was fairly simple, especially because we don't actually have to calculate anything based on rotation. We're literally just going to move the pawn in the world directions. The nice thing about this movement is, unlike our rotation, which we're going to have to do 2 separate ways for controller or mouse, this is just going to work on my controller or on my keyboard. So great, that part's done. Let us start now looking at the mouse rotation. This part is it's going to be a little longer, so I think I'll just break it out into its own video. So the next video is going to be on mouse rotation. But thank you for watching.